Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You don't have a like ethical framework. You're insane. The right votes for the guy no matter their disagreements. It makes sense to me to entice these voters. That way you don't have to worry about appeasing many conflicting groups. Well, no, donors? Yeah. The right votes for their guy no matter their disagreements. Makes sense to me to entice these voters. It shouldn't. It shouldn't make sense to you to entice certain voters because you don't win support by like being a salesman about it. Right? Does that make sense? You win support by having a popular platform, having a platform that indicates that you believe in something and believing in it hard enough to actually make enemies. As paradoxical as it sounds, trying to entice a wider tent to join you shrinks your tent. You know, like Democrats trying to constantly reify themselves as a big tent political party has only shrunk their tent because of their unwillingness to alienate certain conflicting groups of interest from that tent. For example, the Republicans are a big tent party, as are the Democrats, but they are perfectly willing to say shit that alienates a ton of people. The Republicans are blatantly anti-immigration. They're anti-LGBT. They are anti-black. They are anti- union. They are anti-worker, etc., etc. But that wins them a lot of support because they will rep those positions in a hostile environment and they will make rhetorical appeals consistently along those lines. They ostensibly actually believe in the things that they say they believe. The Democrats have compromised. There isn't a single thing that Democrats haven't been willing to compromise on, including but not limited to the construction of concentration camps. Like, as a result, it doesn't matter that on paper they are pro-union, pro-queer, like, civil rights, etc. They're not willing to actually stand by any of the principles that they espouse. Not when it comes to a hostile environment where, you know, billionaires or some such will push back on that. So they start bleeding support, despite their, like, stated positions being way, way less evil, because they're not willing to stand by or rep those positions. Does that make sense? That's why you can't entice, and you can't appeal to voters on the right wing. This is a mistake that Democrats have made constantly for the past 45 years. You know, the history of modern America post-Vietnam is a history of the Democratic Party become more conservative despite what all electoral evidence has shown to be effective. Did you say they're anti-black? Yes, Republicans fucking hate black people. You know, and yet even still there are black people who vote Republican because there's an ideological consistency that draws people in, and because of various like psychosexual insecurities and like pathologies and the need to prove yourself as one of the good ones that don't have a psychology degree, so I can't fully explain. I don't think that's entirely true. I do know there are many that are out there. No, it is entirely true. The Republican Party ideologically is anti-black. In fact, this has operated to their detriment. The Republican Party is actually so racist that it has prevented them from getting inroads with a quite conservative black community. The black community in America is pretty conservative and is actually a not too insignificant force keeping the Democratic Party from moving further to the left. They are obsessed with virtue signaling two token groups of people, and one of those groups of people is the black community, which is very conservative in a way that very frequently aligns against their own interests, right? Conservatives will like whine and whinge about like the most obvious elements of this, right, is that conservatives will whine and whinge about like what black people have done to America and how like thug culture is ruining this country or some shit like that, and they'll just like call black culture degenerate and all sorts of stuff, right? We all know the upfront ways in which Republicans are fucking racist. But their policy positions actually compound on this. Republicans are anti-education. They are anti-affordable housing. they are pro-suburbia, they are anti-public transit. All of these are axes along which segregation was enforced and reinforced constantly in the 1950s and 60s, right? The segregation of schools, the integration of schools being fraught with opposition from the right wing, and with the introduction of charter schools and private schools and stuff like that, and practices such as redlining that to a certain degree are still around. Republicans hate public education for two reasons, and two reasons, well, actually three reasons only. Number one, they are pro-pedophilia ideologically, so they want to be able to molest kids, and if kids are educated, it's harder to do that. Number two, they are pro-billionaires and pro-capitalism, and if people are well educated, it leads people to critically analyze the systems that they are brought up in and that they live in, which includes capitalism. So education is a threat to capitalism, thus Republicans hate it. And number three, education has been a massive, egalitarian force in race relations in America. And in fact, there was a massive wave of black people getting a raised quality of education post integration, and a massive wave of fear mongering over that exact thing by Republicans who were pro segregation. The opposition to public education and education as a concept from Republicans is as much about race as it is about anything else. It's not like they don't like people of different color. They end up doing stuff like gang culture, which they don't like. No, they straight up do not like people of different colored skins. It is that simple. If we're talking about an in-racial, a within-race context, I guess, there's racism in, within minority communities against their own, their own other members of, that minority. And in that sense, you might call it colorism. The Republicans are literally a colorist, racist party. There are just some ways in which it's not electorally advantageous to state that outright, or would be too electorally damaging even against a force as incompetent as the Democrats. No. All of the things, it is no coincidence that all of the cultural markers that Republicans despise are cultural markers that are associated with black culture. Even, really, really harmless ones. In fact, oftentimes it's, stuff that's objectively a boon to American culture. Stuff like hip-hop music and urban style of clothing at, streetwear and stuff like that. You guys, I don't know if you guys remember this, but in the early 2010s, there was a whole, Fox News crash out. They did this for several years on end, where they were talking about the inner city gangs, and how they would sag their pants and stuff. I will give you infinite guesses as to the kind of racial associations that's designed to draw in the minds of most people. In fact, I'll even go a step further. Some lefties might not even be willing to bite down on this. Republicans fucking love gang culture. They just hate it when black people do it. Republicans love the cops. The cops are just a state-sponsored gang of armed thugs that'll, shoot your dog. Or shoot you. It is purely a race thing for Republicans. I mean, for shit's sake, do I need to pull up the image where it's the fucking guy that was posted a picture of a football player and his high school girlfriend or whatever, and said this is what the Jews took from you or something like that, or any number of images of I don't know, an interracial couple and Republicans freaking out. Do I need to fucking pull up the social media posts about this, and how narratives such as they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats went from in the span of 2 days went from far right Twitter to the fucking office of office of the president, and now mainstream news outlets. They're racist. Well, I don't You're kind of preaching to the choir. I mean, with Mr. Imunov, clearly not. I don't know, what evidence I would need to present to say, yeah, Republicans don't like black people. uh, I only have one more costume to unlock. There are crazy Republicans and there's people like me, although I respect your opinion. Alright. All Republicans are crazy, but I appreciate that you respect my opinion. At least enough to not, like, call me a degenerate or something, which is a pretty low bar, but yeah. I will be forthright, though. I do not respect the opinions of people who will earnestly argue that the Republicans are not a racist party and a racist coalition. You know? I respect that you have that opinion. I don't respect your opinion. I don't respect the analysis that led you to that conclusion. If that is the opinion that you... I do not believe that all Republicans are racist. One against it, we're not all like that, in my opinion. I actually don't think that that's a matter of opinion. I think there is research to confirm that Republicans are more racist than everybody else. I don't think every last Republican voter is racist. I do think that it is a racist party composed overwhelmingly of racist people, and you will never find a Republican politician that is not extremely racist. That's kind of how the party works, right? Hell, racism isn't even like... racism is even kind of like a passé discussion. Right? Like, the Republican Party, more so, the bias that defines them right now is having a burning hatred for immigrants and queer people, defending a genocide by, like, saying that all Palestinians deserve to die, and being pro-pedophilia and protecting Jeffrey Epstein. Those are the modern, like, it's not that frequent that Republicans really talk about, you know, race in the way that they used to in the early 2010s. You know? Like, they don't do that much anymore. Okay, so right now I'm Goggles Koopa. Maybe if I, like, go down to the desert. What is racism in your opinion? Well, if you're asking what is racism, that's not an opinion question. Let's see the textbook definition. Racism. Definition. Merriam-Webster. Number 1. A belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. This is what's more commonly known as scientific racism. That's one definition. Also, behavior or attitudes that reflect and foster this belief, racial discrimination, or prejudice. 2A, rather. The systemic oppression of a racial group to the social, economic, and political advantage of another. Specifically, white supremacy. 2B. A political or social system founded on racism and designed to execute its principles. There you go. Dictionary definitions of racism. Republicans fucking love white supremacy. And they support numerous either hard or soft white supremacist political systems, policies, practices, cultural norms, and so on. It to such an extent that when they are confronted with the reality that these things are white supremacist, if they weren't overtly white supremacist before, then they will simply own the white supremacy. They'll say, like, well, yeah, then I do just believe that, you know, black people are inferior or whatever, right? Keep in mind, I didn't claim that I'm not racist, right? Like, if we're using such a definition of racism as to include minor racial biases, of course I'm racist. Everybody would be racist with definitions like that. And there's value to having definitions like that to sort of understand, define, and, like, characterize racism, right? What I'm arguing is not that I'm so pure and anti-racist, right? I support anti-racist things. I support the destruction of white supremacy as a set of systems, norms, and institutions. Republicans support it, and they will continue to support it if they are successfully argued into a corner where it's like, okay, so do you support white supremacy or don't you? Under the agreed upon conclusion that all of these things that presently you support are white supremacist in character. The destruction of the education system, which has been a massive boon to the black community. The destruction of workers' unions, which has been a massive boon to the working class of all races. You know? So that's what you believe racism is? That's what the dictionary believes that racism is. If you are calling this opinion, then like you're being dishonest. The definitions that I read to you are only opinions insofar as an expert linguist opinion, or the opinions of like thousands of linguists collected into a massive collective understanding of the English language is an opinion. If you're saying that's an opinion, then you don't believe in anything. You know? Like, dog, we're dealing in dictionary definitions here. I'm not saying it's opinion, it's fact, but many Dems don't think the same. I would love to see a source for that. Again, like, if you're going to try to argue to me that, like, the Republican Party isn't racist, or that Republicans, as a general statement, are not racist, then you're fighting a losing battle, and I think you know that you're fighting a losing battle, and I don't think you believe anything you say. Like, what? In my honest opinion, I think ultimately you're a sophist. Technically, when you think about it, everything is an opinion. Ah, baby's first anti-empiricism. Oh, so you're a religioid. I see. Hey, if out of curiosity, if I took away your Bible, how would you determine right and wrong? For example, like, you're not allowed to refer to the Bible. Pretend the Bible doesn't exist. How do you determine that murdering somebody is wrong? You can't invoke the Bible or God. Oh, that's a glider thing? I don't know how I was supposed to believe the morals in us kind of give us a clue that that's wrong. How do you determine that? How do you determine what's right or wrong? You no longer have the Bible, you no longer have God. How do you determine that? I know how I determine that, but I want to hear your explanation, since you think that it's not possible for an atheist to have a code of ethics. There's a new Koopa costumes. Okay, I'm on the way to about where I was thinking about going anyway. You can't, because you have to have a god to have morals. Wrong! Incorrect. Try again. There was a time before religion, there will be a time after religion. How do you determine that killing somebody is wrong in a context where there is no religion? Once again, you can't. So then you're a retard. You've been poisoned by the Bible. Here, look, I'll even give you the answer. It's not a difficult answer. Killing people is bad because when people live, that's good. And of course, when you get into much more complicated social structures, when there could be extenuating circumstances as to any given act and the outcomes wrought by that act, you can deal in edge cases as they arise. I ask you, why does any of that need God to work? Like, are you so morally deficient that when presented with like a reality in which there's no God or no Bible, you do not have an answer to why murdering somebody is wrong? Because right now what you're telling me is the only thing that is keeping you from being a sociopathic murderer is the fact that there's a little book that threatens you with divine punishment for killing somebody. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You don't have a ethical framework. You're insane. Why is it wrong? Because killing people is bad. I don't know if you know this, but there's a thing called axioms. Human flourishing is good. Why? Because it is. I don't have to provide a further justification. Because I fucking said so, right? But your answer to that is because God says so. Remove God from the picture. Why is human flourishing good? Where's the Yoshi Burger place? Here it is, okay. Just gonna transform me into something? Yes, it did! Okay, I have all the Koopa Troopa costumes. Nice. This is gonna be an infinite loop. Human flourishing doesn't matter if there's no God. It only matters that we survive. Wait, you simultaneously, answered and not answered. Look, I don't know if you realize it, but you answered the question correctly at the end. It only matters that humans survive and, flourish or whatever. That human flourishing is good just because it is good. We're learning here, all right? That's called an axiom. That is called a philosophical axiom. Human flourishing is good because I say so. Because it is good. You can't get any more basic than that. Why is killing bad? Because human flourishing is good. And killing reduces the amount of human flourishing. There you go. None of that has anything to do with God. None of that has anything to do with God. And if your axioms rely on a God being present, then what that tells me is you don't have any beliefs. Your beliefs are only as strong as the divine punishment that you were threatened with, which is to say, non-existent. There's no such thing as divine punishment, right? Oh, you will suffer infinitely in the afterlife. Yeah, great. I would love to hear somebody tell me about that after they fucking died. How was the Earth created? That's a complicated question that has a complicated answer. Being a rock in space that is very big at a basic scientific level, it was created by a number of very complex physical processes that resulted in, solid debris floating around and coalescing around a local star. In a similar manner to how other planets are sort of created as well. To the best of our understanding, Earth was formed by numerous rocks basically colliding with each other over the course of billions and billions of years. This still happens sometimes. Whenever a meteor like strikes the Earth, that's part of the process of how Earth was initially created. There's just a lot less of those rocks floating around because initially stars are born from nebulae, large clouds of gas, and sometimes those clouds of gas can you know clump together. So certain elements can cool off to such a degree that they change their state of matter, etc., etc. Basically, enough rocks banged together, stuck together, formed, and like formed a large enough thing that had a gravitational field that eventually you had a rock that was basically the size of the Earth. Over time, just the right circumstances enabled the, like liquid water and stuff to exist without melting or melting, excuse me, evaporating or freezing. Sometimes it did freeze quite a lot for long periods of time. And over time, different like chemical processes developed, created all this beautiful nature. In a sense, you bought an IKEA table and it built itself. Look, if this is going to be like some shit where you're trying to argue that some random hand of God created this shit, then I might as well just ban you now. So let me know if you're trying to like argue some fucking divine creation theory bullshit. Just save us all the trouble and I can ban you now and never have to see you again. Because what you're dealing with here what you're dealing in here rather is fundamentally anti-empirical thought. What I'm citing is well, theories and hypotheses that have been built on the collection of evidence, right? Things that we know happen over a long period of time that result in other things happening, right? A exists, A leads to B, leads to C, But if you're going to sit here and tell me that, like, oh yeah, and then he rested on the seventh day, then, please let me know. Again, I would like to save myself the headache, if possible. I would love to debate with you. That's too bad, because you are a brainlet, and I'm not interested in debating with somebody who would result in me crashing out, losing brain cells, and having a shit-ass day. And I don't respect your religious beliefs, because they are making you a way worse human being. Here you are hounding somebody for a debate in their Twitch chat when I'm here to, like, talk about current events and my thoughts on them and play some nice Mario Kart, and you have no regard for the flow of conversation. Clearly. Bye. I fucking hate these people, dude. I'm gonna change sticker as well. I unlocked a few. Yeah. Look at that. Super Circuit. Let's go with the B Dasher, the classic Mario vehicle. Bro, I'm not gonna lie, that wasn't even, like, entertaining. That was a fucking, like, half an hour of that guy concern trolling and pretending to be intelligent before revealing that his entire belief system is predicated on a divine patriarchal figure that will punish you for doing anything wrong. Yeah, literally like a child's brain. Like, you can't argue with them. Like, I don't think people at home might not realize how insane it is that that guy admitted that if he murders somebody, he wouldn't be sorry he did it, he would be sorry he got caught. People have no fucking idea how insane a religious framework of belief makes you, especially in this country. Jesus Christ. Ugh. Sure, let's go southwest here. So you're like, why should I care if there's no punishment? Yeah, exactly. That's like you can always, like, if in the process of interrogating either your belief system or somebody else's, there should always be a way for you to work your way backwards with the Socratic method. However sloppily I may have employed it. I'm not the greatest at debate. I have some debate chops, right? But, like, there's only so much you can do when you're faced with somebody like that. There's always a point that you can go back to where eventually you are faced with philosophical axioms, where something is simply good because it is good, and that is what you believe, right? Like, you know, an axiomatic difference of opinion would be like if I said, I believe human flourishing is good, and somebody else said, like, well, I don't agree. I think human suffering is good, and we should maximize human suffering, right? There's no way for me to argue against that. That's the point at which you find a rock and you beat the other person to death, right? That's a axiomatic difference of opinion. It's literally irreconcilable, right? But this guy was saying that even his axioms, the things that you just believe because you believe it, right? Like, you believe it because there's, like, no more fundamental or basic thing that you could believe. Even that guy's axioms were completely contingent on a god figure that would divinely punish you for behaving otherwise. They don't believe anything. People who think like that, they don't believe anything. They only believe in the stick that you hit them with. Which I shouldn't need to tell people is, like, absolutely unhinged. Mine's more like, I like something. Yeah, and look, that, you know, we're talking about philosophical axioms, right? And, like, it's a point beyond which, like, you can't go any further back. So, like, sure, whatever, right? You know, why are good things good? Because they're good, you know? Your answer to why is a like, extremely basic good thing good cannot be because God said so. Because now you're just, like, again, you're in, like, child brain mode. Ugh. God damn it. This was originally supposed to... I'm definitely not going to make this a segment now. I originally wasn't planning to either. This was supposed to be a fucking segment about the Democrats, like, autopsy, quote-unquote, of the 2024 election, where they were like, yeah, we don't need to interrogate any of the things that we did wrong. Is that as an argument on why these people can't be reasoned with? I guess I could. I suppose that does kind of work as an argument to demonstrate, like, the conservatives are literally incapable of using their faculties of reason. You know, they have no faculties of reason anymore with which to engage with society. What's this one? Same thing. History killed each other over opinions. Oh, yeah. People have, like... You should believe in something strongly enough that you're willing to go to lengths for it. Like there should be something that you believe in hard enough because of, like, the reasons of it being good that you're willing to work, like, do actual work for it. You know? Which usually entails a fight in which somebody will die. Not to say, like, a fist fight or whatever, but, like, you know, think about what activists do, right? Activists believe in a cause hard enough to go to bat for that every day, either in a, you know, in a court of law or, you know, on social media, in, you know, in the ear of politicians who may not care about what they have to say. And every day that they lose that battle, somebody dies. You know, somebody's, like, going to suffer as a result of you, like, not being able to realize your vision for the world right away. But it's important for you to have that vision to motivate you to, like, do something good, right? And in order to do that, you have to actually believe in something that isn't just, how do I get God to not punish me with eternal suffering in the afterlife, right? Ay, ay, ay. In fact, this is one of the things that makes me argue that there are a lot of progressives who are religious that aren't actually religious. You know, It's kind of just like a social in-group, out-group thing, because there are a lot of, there are people who I believe are much better people than you know, than your average Jimbo, right? If there is something, you know, in like their religious text that is obviously antiquated, they will acknowledge as much, which means that the source of their beliefs isn't actually the religious book. It's what they believe, right? That in my opinion, that is a green flag. You know? So like your average progressive that like maybe takes a look at here, let's use an example from another religion, right? Because I have read the Quran. You know, say there's a progressive Muslim out there who you ask about the passage in the Quran that says that women should have half of the property rights that men have, right? Like effectively, like a woman should count as half of a person, right? It does say that in the Quran. If you could ask a progressive individual, like a left-leaning Muslim, about that passage or those, passages in the Quran, and they would say, yeah, it was a different time. They might make some excuses, but ultimately would probably agree that, like, yeah, we've advanced as a society, and women should have the same rights as men. They would take a different stance from the Quran because they actually believe in something that isn't necessarily grounded solely in the holy book or the divine punishment that is implied by the existence of, like, a God figure. Does that make sense? Stuff like that is a major green flag in people. And when that is decidedly absent, when people are obsessed with the holy book or the God figure as the source of all moral and ethical belief, that is an enormous red flag, because you could pose them the simple question, as you saw me do there, you could pose the simple question of, okay, if there's a context in which you don't have the God figure or the holy book, why is killing somebody bad? Can you answer that question? They actually can't answer. Or worse yet, they would answer it with, well, it wouldn't be bad if there was no God figure present. Reminds me of when I was 5 years old. Thank you. I needed that. It's like 10. I was like, this guy makes no sense. Time to throw into the trash. That's a relatively similar ideological or religious arc of thought that I followed when I was a kid. Although for me, I think it was when I was like 12 or 13, and I was like, religion doesn't make any fucking sense. The concept of a god like doesn't make sense. Initially it was just kind of like the edgy. It was like a kind of edgy teenage coded rejection of religion. But the more time grew on, the more I've like kept getting reified. Like the more I questioned it, and the more I thought about and read about like religion and like the character of certain religious groups and stuff like that, the more I was convinced that, like, okay, yeah. And I wasn't raised in an especially religious context. I mean, I guess it was kind of religious in a very secular sense, in that it was a multi-faith household, but it was ultimately still a household of faith, if that makes sense. But I think they taught me something way more important than, like, faith-based belief or whatever, which was critical thought. So, you know. Bye-bye, Bibble. Is that green? No, that is blue. I can go do that one. Wasn't even dramatic. One day I was like, wait a minute, reality just don't make sense. Goodbye. Yeah, I don't know if mine was as sudden as that, but yeah, good good on you. Sometimes, people say, like, nobody just wakes up and realizes whatever. Sometimes you do just wake up and realize some shit. You know? Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.